This is just a very high level view of what the current version of the hybrid data delivery, which sits within Qlik Data Services now, and what it does and what I'm going to demo today. They know it's one use case, and this is just the first use case they're meeting, and there's going to be lots of things that scale up from here, but this is what I'll show you today. There is a vision for much bigger stuff. So it's all about getting on-prem data, some of the known data sources like SQL Server or other databases, and then it uses Replicate and a bit of the Cloud Data Services to push that data up into an Amazon S3 bucket. Again, it's only AWS S3 at the moment. It will support Azure and other cloud services and so on for that data storage. And that's called landing the data. So it kind of takes a copy of it, pushes it to somewhere else, what they call landing. If you've done anything with Replicate before, then that's a common concept to have, and you land the data somewhere before you do anything. And that bit there is one of the key things, is that is done using change data capture. So that's done using the clever technology that Replicate uses. So it only moves to transactions that have changed. And I'll try and demo that as part of this to show not only setting it up, but also how it works when it changes, when you change records. And so it'll only upload each record that's been updated or deleted or inserted. So that's very clever. And it maintains that in that data folder in the bucket. But then the even newer stuff is that then it has this storage area, and what this part does is it picks up those landed data files, and it interprets them, because there's inserts and deletes and whatever that it needs to deal with, and creates a set of what they're calling active QVDs. So these are QVDs that are updated at most every 15 minutes, but could be every hour or every 6 hours or whatever, with the data that has been very efficiently moved from on-prem to Amazon, and from Amazon into Qlik SaaS, which is also Amazon as it happens at the moment, but in terms of functionality. And then your analysts, your developers, get a set of QVDs that are available to work from and are updated frequently. Yes, and obviously this takes you to infinity and beyond. So that was my yes, yeah. Don't get many laughs on a webinar like this, do you? But anyway, let me go and show you some of this in action. Before I do that, I must have a quick sip of tea. Any questions at this stage?
No, I mean, I was muted. I was in bits just then with that.
Oh, of course, yes, yeah, you were guffawing, I'm sure. Okay, so just to run through a few things that I've got open here. So this is what is known as, this is Enterprise Manager, but essentially we're using the Replicate part of this. Enterprise Manager can manage, replicate, and compose. It's like a combined interface. And this is the bit that's going to load our data from our on-prem database and push it into the landing area in conjunction with that. So this is an on-premises server that we're running that's accessing as in this case, a Postgres database. It happens to be a Postgres database of the Qlik Sense repository, because it was a database we had to hand, and it's very easy for us to update and make changes to. Which is in fact this Qlik Sense environment here, this internal one. So I'm going to use this to create some apps and so on that we'll be able to see the updates go through if we have time. And then I've got my Qlik Sense. So this is the Qlik Cloud environment, our Qlik Cloud environment, and I'll be using this both to do a bit of analytics, but I will also be using the new button up here, which has data services up the top here. So this is all data analytics. So this is the Qlik Sense Cloud Hub, and then we will be looking as well. So I'm going to open it in a new tab at Qlik Data Services. And this is where we're going to work. You can see these are ones I've been playing with earlier on to make sure it does actually work. Yeah, so without further ado, I'm going to go in, and the first thing you have to do is you create a task in Replicate, or on your on-prem environment in Replicate, to suck the data out and get it ready to push into the cloud. And to do that, I need to set up for each data set, you need to set up what's called another an endpoint, which is a target endpoint, and that's where we put the S3 data in. So I'm going to say this is S3 for hybrid data delivery. There we go, that'll do. And in here, you specify a Qlik Cloud landing. So this is saying I want you to suck the data out of my on-prem database and put it into this AWS bucket, as they call them. So I'm going to copy because I'm going to use the same bucket as my other ones, and I'll just put them in a different folder. So bear with me whilst I do some copying and pasting, and then I go and grab the secret key, which and then I'm going to call this hybrid data delivery. And then I can test that. So what that's doing is it's checking that those credentials that I've set up for AWS exist, so that they work, they allow me to access this bucket, and so on. So I've just had to create a target for that. I've already got my source in here, which is this, as I said, PostgreSQL, which is running in an Azure database, specified which database it is there. So I've got those two components, which is what you need for a task in Replicate. So then I'm going to move through to my task. I'm going to create a new task. If I come in here, I select my server. I've only got one, so we'll do this. This is of type Qlik Cloud Landing. So this is one of the new bits of functionality they've added to Replicate in this very recent version. Okay, and without getting into too much complex Replicate stuff, we are going to let it do full loads and changes. That's the standard thing we want to do. Get rid of that window. So that's going to create a task for us, and then we have to specify that source and that endpoint. So I'm going to do my repository database. Does that work? No. There we go. It puts it up here, and I'm going to put my newly created hybrid data delivery Qlik Cloud landing source. Okay, and then so that says I want to go from here to here, and now I just need to say what data I want to move across. So I come into my table selection, and as you can see, if I just quickly click here, this is aware of all of the tables that sit in this database. There's quite a lot of them, as it happens to be the Qlik Sense repository, but it could be any database. This isn't just for replicating Qlik Sense underlying data. So I've put a search string in here to load everything with the word app in it, and I could choose individual tables if I wanted, but I'm just going to include everything that has the word app in it. So it's going to load a bunch of details about apps from the Qlik Sense environment, the on-prem Qlik Sense environment. I'm going to click OK. There's one other setting I have to come in and check in here, but I think by default it's on now. Oh yeah, I want to change that down to 15 minutes. That's a technicality. That's to do with how often it regenerates the files and refreshes the files. So actually, no, I want to change that. When do we think I'm going to be ready for that to go through? Because you have to try and guess. We're going to be able to, let's do like 27 minutes past, see if we can get it done in the time. Right, I'm going to save that. Okay, so that's a task connecting on-prem to cloud. I don't actually run that task in here as you would normally do in Replicate. What I've done is I have, and obviously I've created this earlier, you can do this concept called create remote enterprise manager resource. So this is a bit that you do in the cloud. You create a registration key and you paste it in here from your on-prem, and that connects the two together. So what we can do now, there's some elements of control from the cloud environment back into that on-prem environment. We have to create the task on-prem at the moment, at least. That won't be the case, I believe, as the roadmap develops, but for now that's how it is. But what I will then create is a new, what they're calling data asset. I'm going to put this in my data demo area. This is a landing, so we'll call it HDD landing, shall we? So there's two types. We'll create a storage one in a minute. Remember what we're doing. We've kind of created this connection from here to here, but we're not run anything yet. It's not actually running. Before we run it, we need to tell give it that, set up this landing task, as it were, in the cloud area. Once you do that, it says, well, now please select your replicate task, which I'll go in and do. It only shows me ones that we haven't already hooked up in this area. So I'm going to do that. You can see it's pulled through some of the details from that I've connected up to the on-prem environment. And I just say OK, and then save. It prompts me then to catalog it essentially. So I could create this as a placeholder if I wanted and then go and update things. At the moment, again, once you've created your schema, like selected your tables and selected your things you want to come through and the frequency of that, that's locked in from the point that you catalog it. OK, which is fine for us today. Obviously, they're going to change that going forwards. But at the moment, once you've cataloged it, you can't really change anything about the task. Which again, if you're deploying this in a live environment, you'd have to think about, you might need to be quite granular about your tasks so that you could change, you didn't have to change big ones a lot of the time. So this says cataloging, I think in the background, it's actually started this task. You might notice here it's gone from run, the stop button is enabled. And if I look on monitoring on this side, yeah, it's not. Oh, in fact, now it's stopped. So it's just run that special catalog task that's pulled through the details. Now, if I go into tables, it is now aware of all of those tables and what what fields they have in them and various settings that it's pulled out of the database. Okay, but this still isn't running. It's still not copied the data. If I now click run on this side, that will trigger this task to run. The first thing it does in replicate is it will do a full load. So we should see, hopefully, this is where all live demos go really well. The list of tables appear at the bottom here and records starting to be distributed. There we go. So you can see that's it, grabbing all those tables, pushing them all up to the cloud. That's into the S3 bucket at this stage. And then once it's finished that, it will sit there still running, waiting for any changes to come through, and hopefully we'll have time for me to show you how those changes get processed. But you can see, insert, update, delete, DDL, which is like changing in the schema, and how many errors and so on and so forth. But we'll just leave that sitting there for now. The okay, so we've got our landing area that's running. We can come back to the data services hub. So that's the landing data asset. So our data is actually now sitting in S3, just in a not hugely useful format, because it's going to be partitioned into one folder for every 15 minutes with a CSV file, which becomes quite difficult to process. So it has this concept of storage, where it will then convert that into useful data for Qlik Sense to consume. So we're going to create that. We are going to create another asset in that same space. This time it will be storage, so we'll call it HDD storage, although that sounds like we're storing something on a hard disk drive. And then you get this interface. So what is your source data? Here you go, you can see the ones that I've created earlier. This is the one we're looking at, HDD landing. So it says, okay, I want you to take the data out of the HDD landing. Where do you want it to go to, where's it, what's the data connection you want to use that goes to that folder? So yes, I want you to use this. There is an option here to use Qlik Managed Storage or not. So you can set up another S3 bucket, or even the same one but with a different folder for this to be stored in. But there is some downsides to that at the moment, I think, around data profiling and so on, and creating apps from QVDs and so on. So at the moment, they recommend just using the managed storage, but if there are reasons why you don't want that, you can choose something else here. I'm going to use the Qlik Managed Storage. Again, once that kind of gives you this, you've got this view of the tables that it's pulling out of the landing area that you're going to use. This is the source area. If I now save this, it's going to prompt me again to catalog it again. It's a similar process. It's now looked in that folder to see what it can find, and now it's going to create, figure out what tables and so on it can create from that. Basically going to be the same. In the future, I imagine they might allow some transform steps through this process. So that's why it's kind of multi-staged a bit more rather than just kind of flowing through. They've got that in mind. That is how it works. So that is successfully cataloged. So I can now get to the tables area. You can see slightly different things in here. These have got table names. These have got QVD names, very similarly named in there. Again, I'm going to run this. And this will then go and create our QVDs. So let's see how long I've got. I've got 6 minutes, I think, until the next kind of partitioning happens, and it'll update the QVD. So we'll see if we can get to where we want to be. Okay, so those are both running. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and look. I'm going to create a new app. There we go. That's fine in my personal area. And we'll go and look at those QVDs that it's created. You're going to see a bunch of QVDs in there that have been in there, for a while. It's very similar ones as I was practicing my demo. But we're going to look in our data demo area and in data files. I can actually see in the S3 area here, you see these are my 3 folders. This is the HDD one we found. As you can see, it creates these kind of sets of folders, which if you've ever done much with Replicate, or even with some of the kind of, Hadoop and stuff like that, you get similar folders to this. So you'll get a folder with a, that one doesn't have a CSV in it, but some of these will have CSVs in, and so on. So this is how it stores the data, which it then combines, so you don't have to worry about figuring out that stuff. And these then into nice QVDs. So there we go, HDD. Let's grab our apps one. And I'm just going to add that. And just quickly, I will add one more, so we can show a little bit of the additional stuff. Let's add some data from our data files, and let's do app objects. There we go. I'm not going to clean this up too much. There's lots I would do about renaming fields. I'm just going to, it figures out what the app ID is. That's fine. I'm going to call that app ID. I find it really hard to see tables named that way. So I will really quickly just update them, app objects, and just apps. Some of the fields are going to be a little bit crazy, but built a basic app there, just sucking in 2 tables, apps and app objects. It's really, really straightforward, but this is just to show how we do this. Now, what will be interesting is in the background already, if I do that, we should see, he says with full confidence, no, we shouldn't, because I'm doing that in the, that's a different thing I'm going to show you later. Right, I'm just very quickly going to come in here, and we will, from the apps table, let's get the name, and we'll get the date it was created, and then we'll do something very similar for the app objects. In here it's called description, I think. Yeah. And the created date is on. Just grab the date of that. Oh, I think in fact it might be useful to have type as well. So this is all just back-end information around what has gone on in there. So if we have a look in here, we sort by the most recent apps. You can see there's the one very cleverly named that I created earlier, and so on. But we're going to create a new app to sit at the top of this list, and it'll have some objects in it as well in due course. Okay, so what that's done is sort of feels a little bit circular, but we've got our data out of the Qlik Sense repository on-prem and pushed it into the cloud. I'm now very quickly, in the next minute, going to really quickly, if I can, create a new app in the on-prem environment, which should capture some changes. What are my chances? Is it going to log me in time? 45 seconds. Someone do the countdown theme song. Never taken so long to load the page. Come on, you can do it. Sorry, it didn't take this long before. Not going to make it, am I? Not going to make it.
It's very tense.
It'd be impressive if it works.
Wow.
I don't know why it suddenly started going so slowly. There we go. Okay. Well, never know. Enterprise Manager. There we go. Look, public app object. So we can see in here, apps has updated at 2:26 apparently. So maybe I got it just in time, and that has pushed through. So this is the Enterprise Managers monitoring that database, which has had an update. It's updated these things at 2:26. I don't know whether I tested it's gonna flow through automatically. But what I can do in Data Services is you can see that data is up to date as of 2:27, and this one, the storage one, is just updated at 2:27 as well. I don't know if you saw that time just changed. Okay, so that initial data load goes through, and I've set it so that every 15 minutes from 27 minutes past the hour, it's going to refresh the data. Now, let's see if we got there in time or whether that didn't quite work out. So if I come through and I refresh this, are we going to see tense show at the top of the list or not? No, we didn't make it in time. What a shame. Disappointing. Oh no, tense is there. Sorry, it is there. It just didn't appear top of the list because this is sorted by date, not date time. There we are. Okay, so tense was created, and at the point that this was generated, the only object that existed for it was the app script, which I think makes sense if we look in here. App objects. We've had some other inserts in there as well, and some apps. Okay, so maybe we call it partway through that update. The idea is that it is monitoring that, and all it did when I created that app was do these inserts and updates in the S3 bucket, which then got interpreted into the QVD storage by Qlik QDI, and then we were able to load that into our app. So that is the that is the full kind of end-to-end flow in a very brief thing, and I appreciate that was a lot of kind of talking and demoing by me, but yeah, we've kind of worked through this process, in this case Postgres to an S3 bucket using Replicate and Data Services, and then using Data Services to create a storage area, which we then went into Qlik Sense at the end.